What are the questions that no atheist will be able to answer?
Ooh, questions that no atheist can answer? You're speaking my language. Grab a drink, everyone, and let's begin.
What are the questions that no atheist will be able to answer? A. How did existence emerge out of no space and no time? How can an atheist assume that his atheism is valid when the moment of the start of existence is a stark proof on the creativity of the Creator and his ability to originate existence?
As far as we can tell, everything began with the Big Bang, the rapid expansion of the universe from an extremely hot, dense singularity that held all the concentrated matter of our reality. Space and time were also contained in the singularity too. Now, if you ask me why the singularity expanded, or where the singularity itself came from, I have no idea. But isn't that just a little bit exciting? Doesn't it make you curious? Instead of just trying to shoehorn God done it, let's investigate, let's try and find out, discover some of the secrets of the universe. Furthermore, the fact that the universe began at some point is not stark proof of a creator. It's stark proof that the universe began to exist at some point. And even that could just be our local presentation of the universe. We could have an infinite cosmos, starting and restarting, expanding and collapsing, and we just are in one simple form of that bigger cosmos. That sounds a lot better than a proposal of magic from some supernatural being.
B. How did no life transform into life? How did matter mutate from lifelessness into living cell? With all our techniques and advancements, we cannot, till this very moment, originate the simplest form of life. So how can we explain the origination of life in the dead matter? Wouldn't we have been at least able to originate a form of life that supersedes the one that originated in the dead matter by at least 1,000,000 times?
There is a term for the origination of living organisms from non-living material, and that's abiogenesis. It is a wildly complex topic, but there are people working restlessly and finding more and more about how abiogenesis could have occurred. Every day we get more and more information. Just because we don't have an exact process, an exact moment in time that abiogenesis occurred, doesn't mean that anything can be thrown in there. That's classic God of the gaps fallacy here. In fact, even if we knew exactly nothing about how life actually began, it doesn't make the hypothesis that God did it any more valid. This is like someone from 2 centuries ago pointing at birds and saying, "Look, these animals fly, and we don't have that yet. We haven't put humans in the sky, and that is a perfect proof of God because we're pretty advanced now. We should be able to do that." That's the exact same argument here.
How can the atheist argue against the annihilation of all mankind? What is the rational, substantial, and scientific evidence an atheist can present to prove that annihilation of all mankind is a mistake? The material world knows no right and wrong, so annihilation of mankind must be equal to keeping them alive from their perspective.
I may be nothing but a lonely ghost, but I think it is safe to say that people as a whole would rather not be annihilated. Morality comes from agents, of which people happen to be. If there were no thinking agents, there would be no morality. And I can assure you that almost every thinking agent on the planet would rather not be annihilated. Also, don't put words in my mouth. Even though you are saying the material world doesn't care, it sure sounds like you're saying the materialists are saying that annihilation and life are equal. And that is a ridiculous strawman.
D. Atheism assumes that human beings are just animals who came into existence after a long and slow sequence of evolution from meaner beings. So what if a higher being came into existence? Will it have the right to put us all in cages and use us as lab rats? The Darwinist answer that we derive from matter is yes. So, what's the purpose from protecting mankind or providing them with meaning or purpose when it comes to atheism?
Oh, wow. There is so much wrong in this one, it's hard to know where to even begin. First off, there's no such thing as a higher being. Each animal is suited to their environment. You are no more evolved than your pet, because there is no such thing as more or less evolved. There's no end goal with evolution. It just happens. On to the next point. If a being, let's say an alien that was dramatically more powerful, showed up, then we may become things like lab rats if that being so chose. That does not make that action moral. Also, stop putting words in my mouth. Not only do I not agree with this statement, nor do any atheist or agnostic people I know. Finally, your last point here is almost an entirely other subject. Long story short, there is no meaning or purpose when it comes to atheism. Atheism is simply a single answer to a single question. It is the rejection of a claim that a God exists. It doesn't even attempt to answer questions about purpose or reality. And most importantly, it doesn't have to. It's not a worldview. It's just not included.
E. What if, according to evolution, we proved that one race is higher than the other? Will the higher race be entitled to transform the lesser race into used matter, as we do with the lesser insects or animals? Again, the Darwinist answer is yes. This very argument is enough to obliterate atheism from any mind that utilizes common sense, since the only criteria to judge who is better than who is the criterion of God-fearingness, not by color or strength.
Okay, we literally just talked about this. Once again, evolution doesn't care. There is no higher or lesser evolved. If you're trying to say that people are more evolved than, say, fish, try living under the ocean. You are suited to your environment, and that is it. So there can be no race that's higher evolved. That's insane. We are all reliant on the sun. It introduces energy to the not-so-closed system that is Earth. While we use this energy by varying means, too much sunlight can be dangerous. The pigment melanin helps protect us from the damage of sunlight. The closer you are to the equator, the more sunlight Earth receives. So human populations that lived on or near the equator gradually gained more melanin than those further away, with the fun exception being those populations near the poles who received lower amounts of sunlight, but also had sunlight reflecting off of the snow to essentially double the sunlight received. Those populations also got a darker shade of skin compared to other populations who lived relatively close to them. But that's all skin color says about you. What part of the world your ancestors came from. That's it. And a skin level difference would never, I repeat, never give someone the right to transform the lesser race into used matter. What is that insanity? For the sake of argument, let's say that I even agree with you on your last sentence, that we can only rank people based on their level of God-fearingness. Which God? I know this comes from a Muslim, so I assume Allah, but to be properly fearing of God, I need to have proof that that God even exists. Otherwise, it is like being scared of the boogeyman or the Yeti. It makes no sense without hard proof. Give me that proof, and then we can start talking about fear.
F. Atheists argue that morals are relative, meaning can be seen from more than one perspective. So, honesty can be better than betrayal, or betrayal can be better in some cases. Yet, when confronted with their own trials, they claim outright that morality is objective and that things like honesty or betrayal are absolute. Because if morals are relative, then immorality makes no sense, since we will never be able to set a line between morality and immorality. This is definitely a clear contradiction, because if morality was objective and absolute, then this law of morality must have had a lawgiver, the will of Allah, and divine accountability. If morality was relative, then no atheist must complain from immorality or even comprehend its concept.
This whole rant is not even a question. I thought that was the whole point of this video, asking questions that atheists can't answer. This reveals what I believe to be the true purpose all along, to make people who already believe in this to feel good about themselves and their beliefs. As for the actual point, for the love of all that is unholy, stop with the straw man. I'm going to skip the first section because that's all this is, and I'm sick of responding to statements that no atheists have actually made. Your main point here seems to be that morality can only be objective and absolute if there's a lawgiver, in this case Allah. Does morality need to be objective and absolute? For example, let's take killing. Killing seems like a bad thing, right? I feel like we can agree on that. Taking the life of another human being seems pretty bad. But let's say that you or your loved ones are being attacked. You're backed up against a wall and there are no other options but to fight back. You hit the aggressor and knock him out. When the aggressor falls, their head hits the corner of a brick and they die. Does this result in eternal torment in your religion? The taking of a life, but it's out of self-defense and without the intent to kill. I would hope not. And any God who would condemn you to hell for something like that is sick. This goes to show that morality is not absolute, not black and white. There's circumstances that are very fine shades of gray, and each situation is unique.
How did the amazing constants of physics emerge? All of these constants entail very intricate differences that must never vary, even by the slightest or minutest fraction, or the whole universe would collapse. For instance, the cosmological constant is fine-tuned to 120 decibel places, and if it was 1 decibel more or less, the whole universe would collapse. This precision proves that accuracy of a great maker, noting that the constants are numerous in physics and all of them are intricately precise.
Props for actually asking a question this time.
You're right. That's giving you way too much credit.
In short, I have no idea where the fundamental constants of the universe got their values from, and maybe we never will. But you cannot simply state that it proves you're God. You have to demonstrate that this God exists, number one, and then that your God has made the fundamental constants the way they are. You can't just say, until we know why these are the way that they are, my way is right. If that were the case, then I vote that the godless cranium's lazy-eyed pink dragon is responsible. But unholy roast, you just threw out something that someone made up to say why the fundamental constants are the way they are. Yeah, I did. And yet at this time, the lazy-eyed pink dragon is an equally compelling progenitor of these constants, because neither are convincing in the slightest. Sorry, godless cranium. Another thing I'd like to point out here is that it may be, in fact, pure luck that the fundamental constants have their values the way they are in the way that enables our specific life and experience to exist. So what? If you were to draw any 7 cards from a deck of 52, no matter what the arrangement is, you'll have the same probability. That means that you could potentially draw a full house and aces, and that could be an amazing thing to us because we prescribe that value to it, where really the 6, 7, 5, 2, Jack, King, and Queen you pulled is just as likely and just as rare as the hand that we put a lot of value in. The fact that these fundamental constants we have at their current values enables us to live and enables us to look at them and wonder is kind of irrelevant. It doesn't even quite matter in the scale of things, because if they were any other way, we wouldn't be here to wonder at them. So that still gives you no step further into showing a God exists.
H. How did the genome emerge within the living cells? A code must require a coder, and this genome designates what each cell will be used for. Doesn't this prove that there is a unique maker dictating very specific codes?
Let's talk about models for a second. Now, models can be anything from a tool in scientific research to be able to break down something into easily quantifiable variables, or it could be even as something as simple as an analogy, kind of like this. It's easy to say that the genome is a code, and it's actually really useful as well. Saying it in that way makes people understand it better with differing levels of understanding of genetics as a whole. They don't require 4, 6, who knows how many years of study to really understand what's going on. They get a general idea when the genome is referred to as a code. However, models in general are wrong because they simplify something that is in actuality very complex. That simplification makes every single model flawed at one level or another. This points out the flaw with calling the genome a code. While it may be similar to a code in some ways, in that these genes carry instructions on how our cells work, build proteins, structures, everything you can think of, it's not a code. I'm not very good at describing exactly the difference between the two. Vice Rhino has a response to it in his video series to Pseudoscience Uprising that is fantastic, and I'll link it down below. But in essence, the genome is not a code, and it doesn't need a designer, as it can come up from incredibly simplistic building blocks of life. The first genome did not come on until very late in the scope of living material. The first genetic information was likely RNA. As long as it can multiply, you have all you need to eventually arrive at a full genome, especially given the massive scale of time, which is exactly what we find through the history of the Earth.
Where did morality and values come from? When it comes to atheism, atheism sees the universe as a tumultuous sea of atoms that makes no sense and have no purpose, which was one of the driving motives to immorality and depravity. But since morality does exist, then atheism is invalid.
Atheism doesn't care about morality and values. It just doesn't. I don't want to touch lightly on morality again here, and nor do I want to go into a very long rant when the video is almost up. Here's what I will say. I actually like the phrase, the universe is a tumultuous sea of atoms. That's kind of cool, but it's not like that sea doesn't make any sense. As a species, we are constantly learning more about the universe we are in, and it's thrilling. Each little thing we learn has the potential to be the gateway to an entirely new field or a perspective to open up some corner of science. And in the same token, each little thing we learn shows us how little we understand things around us. How incredible is that? How many mysteries are out there? How much can we still learn? A staggering amount, I would bet. We can safely say that we know a lot of information, but compared to the knowledge that could be available ever, I'll bet we know hardly anything. These thoughts leave me in awe. It's one of the most beautiful aspects to this life. Not knowing something isn't horrible. It's not the end of the world. It's exciting. The search should thrill you, not make you boldly and ignorantly declare, God did it. And if you do go there, I'm sorry. You're missing out. The ending of this video goes to a poem that doesn't really do anything for me. I'll put the link in the description below so you can see for yourself and make sure that I'm honest. That'll always be a part of my channel. Anyway, of the two people who will probably find this, or, maybe myself looking back on this in a while, thanks for watching. This has been The Unholy Roast, and thank you for listening to my still small voice.